Oh, worship was really great this evening, wasn't it? You know, hearing that bridge of somebody's grace running after us hits a little different on Marathon Sunday, doesn't it? Man, when you're talking about preparing for a marathon, the individuals in a marathon, they go through an experience and training unlike anything else, right? And one of the aspects of that, as they're preparing for this arduous journey, is experiencing something that we experience all the time, but we don't think about. And they have to be conscious of. And that's the act of breathing. When is the last time that you've thought about breathing? If you're running for a marathon, you have to train your body, like, don't forget to breathe. Breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your mouth. Is that right, Brad? I'm trying to remember. That's right. Okay, yeah. But you have to breathe and be conscious of it and thinking about it. But the truth is, we don't think about it very often, right? Except for right now that I'm bringing it up, you're thinking about it. There's no class for all of our kids in the audience here going to class for breathing exercises for them to learn how to breathe properly. And that's because we don't think of it. We just have a natural inclination and knowledge and trust that breathing is taking place and it's sustaining us. We have to breathe in order to survive. And the truth is that this is just an example that we are sustained by circumstances and conditions that are beyond our control. Things happen to us and by us that if they did not occur, our lives would end. The air around us is one of those items that our lungs take in and we have no control over. As we have already discussed in the very beginning of Genesis, creation is nothing but this masterful gift of grace that God has given to each one of us that we may live and live abundantly. God didn't create out of necessity, but he did this out of the overflow of his goodness that we receive these benefits. Unfortunately, we've also learned, though, how humanity has corrupted God's perfect creation with sin. Over the past few weeks, we have seen humanity descend into a worse and worse scenario of our own making. From Adam and Eve's rebellion against God in Genesis 3 to Cain's murder of his own brother. And then last week, as Rafe introduced to us, this society that was built by the very heart that we see in Genesis 6:5, where it said, the Lord saw the wickedness of man that was on the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And in God's grace, he sustained humanity while destroying the evil among the earth by the great flood. And this week, we see that Noah, along with his sons and their children, are coming out of the ark. And as they are coming out, it presents this problem. How are we going to prevent history from repeating itself? How is God going to keep humanity from this endless cycle of depravity that's been created that just gets worse and worse as each generation comes along? God understood that something needed to be established that in order for us to be able to survive and live. And God in his sovereignty establishes what is known as a covenant with Noah that still benefits us today. Though judgment wiped the earth clean, God's next act reveals not wrath, but grace, unending grace, a promise to sustain creation despite sin. God's covenant of common grace is what upholds and sustains humanity today. It's God's covenant of common grace that it holds us this evening. What does this mean? We are going to be diving into this covenant with Noah by explaining what is a covenant? What does that actually mean? What are the benefits of having this covenant that we see? And why does it matter for us today? So, first of all, what is a covenant? What is a covenant? If you guys want to read along with me, this is Genesis chapter 9, starting in verse 8. It says, "Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, 'Behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. It is for every beast on the earth. I establish my covenant with you, and never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall be a flood to destroy the earth.'" So with Noah, for the first time in biblical history that we see this word covenant used, but it's not going to be the last time that we see this. It is essential that we understand this word as we continue today to live by the very covenant that we're reading in Scripture from Noah. A covenant is a multifaceted concept that defines a relationship between two different parties. It's this binding promise between two individuals or groups or even governments between each other. This can be seen and done here between God and man, but also historically we've seen this done between two men or between nation and nation. But the concept was the same, that the two sides would come into some level of a contractual promised agreement with each other where stipulations would be set and that the blessings of the relationship would be made clear of what each side was receiving. It's a commitment, however, not just bound by the paper written on it, but it was bound by the honor and character given by God. In the ancient Near East history, we see this with a lot of city-states taking place where they would make these commitments to each other. But here we see it go on to an extra level in the relationship that we have with God. The covenant changes a little bit when we're talking about our relationship with God because this is a definition of the relationship, but the relationship is built upon God's affection he has towards his chosen people to whom he is sharing this covenant with. As we've already seen from last week, Noah found favor with God, and a promise of a covenant came with that affection that we see from chapter 6. And covenant grows out of the goodness of God and his desire to see blessings upon his people. So God initiates this relationship with Noah, but unlike two governments that would be negotiating the deals, this covenant, as all covenants with God are, is very one-sided. God gains no benefit or advantage from the covenant that he's built and established, but it is for the benefit of Noah and his offspring. Not only for us, but this covenant is listed as for every living creature. The curse of humanity has had huge ramifications on the animal kingdom and the world in general. And here we see our covenant with God finally coming into a benefit for them as well. God is committed to Noah, in turn, all of humanity, as we all come from Noah and we get the benefits of this covenant as well. Covenant love is a steadfast, loyal, committed love demonstrated both by action and by sacrifice. I think the most tangible example that we see in that today is within a Christian marriage. We see a mirroring of God's unwavering love for his people in the heart of a biblical Christian marriage with Christ at the center. We see commitment between a husband and a wife, not bound by just contractual agreements or exclusivity rights, but in recognition of before God a promise to love, care, and honor one another. You look at the husband and the wife committing to one another, not to their own benefit, but for the benefit of each other. The intent of the Christian marriage is to seek the benefit of the person that you are committing to, not your own benefit. I think the English theologian Richard Baxter, he states this very clearly as he describes common duty. He says, the common duty of a husband and wife is especially to be helpers of each other's salvation, to stir up each other to faith, love, and obedience and good works, to warn and help each other against sin and all temptations, to join in God's worship in the family and in private, to prepare each other for the approach of death and comfort each other in the hopes of life eternal. Man, we want to be encouraging each other and covenant loving with each other. And just like a loving husband, God approaches Noah in this moment, not because of Noah's actions or character, but out of his love for him and the knowledge that Noah, along with the rest of humanity, was in need of grace. The covenant established was in order to allow humanity to no longer become as depraved and corrupted as the culture that was created before the flood took place. The theological term for this is called common grace. Wayne Grudem, his definition of common grace is the grace of God by which he gives his people innumerable blessings that are not part of salvation. So there is innumerable benefits that we receive from God having no conditions, and it is for all of humanity. But we do not directly correlate that to our salvation. But as we see, when God gives this to Noah, his sons, and all of their offspring, which includes us, the benefits of this covenant is being given to Noah, and we get to receive, which we live in right now. So what are those benefits? What are the benefits that we are getting? What is God signing us up for? I think first benefits that we receive of the covenant is some of the promises of God. You can read about this back in chapter 8, verses 21 and 22 as we read. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. God's first promises now are the judgment has been fulfilled, that he will never destroy the world as he has done through flood. This manifests in 4 different ways that we see just through this scripture. First of all, God promises not to curse the ground. The first time we see sin take place, what happens? God curses the ground. Genesis 3:17. And to Adam, he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree, which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain, you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Because of the sin that Adam brought into the world, it was increasingly difficult to get any produce and to harvest growth from the land because of its cursed condition. And yet it was hoped that Noah would resolve this situation. We see this in Genesis 5 when his father Lamech gives Noah the name. In Genesis 5:29, it says he calls his name Noah, saying, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. It was hoped that Noah was going to bring about the very relief that we see. But this relief didn't come, however, because of Noah's efforts or because of his character or because of his goodness, but it was because of God's covenant with Noah. God saw that it was needed for work to be spared and for it to become good once again. You know, there's so much that we have no control over the success of how the ground is going to grow product, work, effort. But God promises us to continue to provide through the work of the ground that he has created. So the next time that you're out apple picking in the fall, you can thank God for his good covenant. Secondly, we see that God's promises is not to strike down living creatures. One of the primary responsibilities of our creation was to care for the living creatures as God's under shepherds. We see this clearly in Genesis 1, verses 26 through 28, that Adam was given the responsibility to care for those that of the living creatures that he was in charge of. And as we have dominion over them, our failure has been to their detriment. They have unfortunately suffered the consequences of the corruption of the world because of the sin of us in charge. Yet through God's covenant, we see God's protection through promise. As God saved these animals 2 by 2 in Noah's ark and invited them in, now he is able to send them out of the ark with a promise that God will not strike them down out of judgment once again for humanity. Thirdly, we see God's promise to keep seasons and days and nights. When you think about it, the flood actually took a really long time. It almost took a full year between the flooding, between the waters resisting 150 days that the water stayed with no movements. And then months later, we see them finally retreating back from a west wind. God has blown over the earth to subside it, and it stopped raining completely. But eventually, the world is being turned back into its normal, natural order that God had ordained. God promises that seasons would return back to normal, our normal rhythms, the earth's rotation, the spinning on the axis properly to keep everything as it should be is only possible because of the promises of God. God is putting the earth back in order. Lastly, we see that God promises never to flood. While flooding, hurricanes, and tsunamis are still present, God has promised that never will all living creatures be destroyed again by a flood. God is building us not to an end of our story where everything is destroyed, but where everything is transformed and everything is brought right with God. We're going to get to that in Revelation, so just hold on as we get to that. But God has got big plans for us. So through the covenant, we receive these amazing promises of God. Not only do we receive promises, but we receive blessings as well. Read with me. This is the first 7 verses in chapter 9. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon the beasts of the earth and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground and all the fish of the sea. Into the hands they are delivered. Every morning things that live shall be food for you. And as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is its blood. And for your lifeblood, I will require a reckoning. From every beast, I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man, I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of a man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made him in his own image. And you, be fruitful and multiply and increase greatly on the earth and multiply it." God continues in his explanation of what this covenant provides. He dives into the blessings that we are going to receive as this covenant is established. And God shows his desire not to harm humanity, but to see it grow, to see it taken care of, to see it thrive. And God blesses us. From this section, these are the different ways that we see the blessings. First of all, we see God's blessing through growth. Be fruitful. Multiply. God is passionate about families and about children. If there's nothing else that you learn about Park Community Church South Loop, we are passionate about our kids. We have our amazing Loop ministry that we serve. We have care and compassionate programs like Safe Families and Adoptions. We have our abortion ministry that we're trying to preserve life because of the value that we see it bring about. We want to raise our parents to have the theological understanding of what it means to have a healthy family and growth and see these kids thrive because God told us to be fruitful and multiply. To be clear, this is not a directive for all people to just start multiplying biologically, but for many, it's about multiplying spiritually as well. That we will have life continue to take place within our families. Secondly, we see God's blessing through protection, deliverance from animals and the elements. We receive protection from God by the fear of animals that were instilled by God. We have been given intelligence to defend ourselves against animals, and that naturally animals fear humanity as a whole for our protection and our good. We see God's blessing through provision, animals and plants that are provided for us. God has provided crops and animals for us to be able to continue to live and survive. We are sustained by the provision of God around us, nothing to do with our hard work and effort. Lastly, we see God's blessing in the value of life. Life is precious. God shows humanity that the value of life and how sacred we should hold it. Man is made in the image of God, and to not give that image proper reverence and honor is to dishonor God himself. Before the flood, life wasn't honored or valued. Murder was a common thing. God is telling the only humans left the value of life and the need to honor and revere it. Notice the reason behind it. Not for the propitiation of man, not because of its sinfulness, but because of the image of God that we are each imprinted in. Another blessing is that we have been given law and order for our protection. If you notice, this is the first time that we see God charging humanity to enact justice for sin taking place. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. This directly ties into that sacredness of life that we see just before. But this is no light task for us to have life taken away. And because of this, God wants to make clear the consequences of murder. And in this, we see God institute man's judgment for the first time with law and order, and governance is something that God has blessed us with to keep society in tune with the morality of God. Before the flood, it was just anarchy with people killing others, with the deception, with the sin of men continually taking place. And when the government is true, though, and we have it set up and established by God's laws, the people are blessed. Just as Noah was blessed in this moment, we have the opportunity to be blessed as well if we hold true to God's laws and seek out that justice through the goodness of governance. The third benefit that we see of the covenant is through this confirmation in a seal. This is Genesis 9:12 through 17. And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that I have set with you for all future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all the flesh. And the water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the cloud, I will see and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth." God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth." The rainbow that we see in the sky is a seal of the covenant that was given to us, a sign to clearly indicate that the covenant still holds true today as it did thousands of years ago when the flood came. A seal is a confirmation that the contents of an item are authentic and they're unchanged. When a letter is written, you set hot wax and a seal on it to confirm, first of all, the authorship of it, but also to confirm the authenticity, that nothing has been added or subtracted from the contents of the letter that's being sent out. The rainbow is our seal today from God. It is the confidence that we have with the covenant with Noah is once again that is only given by the one who is able to make a rainbow in the sky, by the only one who is able to command the waters to rise up out of the earth and then also to command them to subside and say, you can go no further than this. The seal of the rainbow reveals that the terms have not changed in any way, that God is still in control of humanity as a whole, that because of God's grace, he will not allow humanity to continue to spiral down in their depravity any longer, but that there is common grace and goodness that has come to give us what we could not give ourselves. That even when things are bad, even when the worst of humanity in moments and in history that we see, that God will continue to protect and sustain humanity. That God will defeat evil. The rainbow is this beautiful mix of storm and sunshine, a view of the grace that's given to us. The storms may be coming in our lives, but sunshine is always present, helping us see God in the bigger picture. We see this no better than the example and in the life of Jesus Christ, who came to fulfill on a greater level that common grace to give us salvific grace. Revelation chapter 4, it describes Jesus as this. It says, at once I was in the Spirit, this is John talking, and behold, a throne in heaven with one seated on the throne. And he who sat there had the appearance of jasper and carnelian, and around the throne was a rainbow that had the appearance of the emerald. Jesus came to continue God's work with humanity and to fulfill what the rainbow could not. Jesus came to provide saving grace to everyone who would call him Lord, to not only just be able to live and survive, but to be transformed into the image of God, of who he created you to be, and to live in eternity with him forever. So why does this matter? If we have these benefits, if we have this seal, how does this change us today? I want to leave you with 4 encouragements. First of all, I want you to know that God has a covenant with you. First of all, that God sees you. God knows where you are right now. He has given you grace and blessings, even if you can't see them. Common grace means that God has given you promises and blessings, whether you view them as coming from God or not. I know in moments you may be feeling ignored from God, but God is providing for you. He is making a way. He is blessing you in ways that you didn't recognize. You may feel like God couldn't possibly care for you because of the challenges you're facing. You know, if God is giving grace, why is work so hard? Why am I being persecuted against? If God is giving grace, why is my family a mess right now? If God is giving grace, why am I continually being bombarded by sin that I can't seem to work my way out of? If God is giving grace, then why am I feeling this sense of loneliness and feeling alone? Noah's covenant, the rainbow in the sky, is the reminder that the storms you are facing, even the storms that are created by God, God has as a temporary moment. God still has a covenant with you. The covenant with Noah shows that God is giving grace to you, even in the times that you feel forgotten, downcast, and astray. Isaiah 43:2, it says, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. God is present with you in the storms that you're facing right now. God is in covenant with you. Another thing that we can take away from this evening is that, I keep on saying this morning, I'm sorry, it's a bad habit, is that all good things come from God. With the covenant of Noah, we recognize that all good things come from God. When we celebrate good things in life, we can thank God that He is the one bringing all good things together. When we breathe fresh air, it's a gift of common grace that our world can support our life. When we eat a delicious meal, it is a gift of common grace that we have the very taste buds that are able to detect the delicious morsels of food that enter our mouths and fill our stomachs. When we see another huge advancement in science where someone has discovered another facet of God's creation, it's a gift of common grace that we are able to understand and comprehend, and that God created in such intricate ways that show the wisdom of God in all things. All good things come from God, even if the agent of those things isn't always good. Common grace gives reasons to why good things can happen to both the righteous and the unrighteous. Common grace means that even when we see good things come from people, organizations, and entities that do not honor God at all, that we can still give credit to those good things to God and his gifts that he gives us because he gives to all humanity. God blesses all people with wisdom and the ability to do good without even knowing that they are doing it, even if the intent is not for the glory of God. Romans 8:28, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for the good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Those who don't know God don't understand the common grace that they're being given, and the good that they may be doing may not be towards God at all, but God can still work it for our good. Third thing that we can understand is that the church has a role in common grace. The church has a role. The church now has the role of the mission of God to create good for all humanity. This means that as the hands and feet of God, we don't selfishly hoard our resources, talents, and gifts only for those who go by the name of Christian, but that we share with an open hand the amazing gifts that we have been given by God. We are the lighthouse in the dark to let a dark world see the goodness of God. So we care for the ground that we cultivate. We take care of animals. We care deeply for families and lean into caring for children. We speak up and advocate for just laws and governments that are abiding by God's rules. Most importantly, we value and honor the life of every human with the dignity made from being made in the image of God. We treat every human as an image bearer who God has given common grace to. The church gets to be part of that fulfillment of the Noahic covenant by helping accomplish God's desires while serving him here on earth. Lastly, I want us to be clear that common grace is not enough to fix your problem with sin. It's not enough. You know, a lot of things didn't survive the flood. One thing that did survive the flood, sin. When in the ark, Noah was there, he brought his own sin with him. We see this, we talked about in Genesis 6, how God described humanity. In Genesis 8:21, what we just read, he repeats the same thing. For the intention of man's heart is evil from youth. God chose the most righteous man he could find, yet sin was still present. Today, most people assume that if we could just get rid of all of the bad people, then society would be fixed. The ark is evidence that that is not how the solution is going to work. It's not going to be more of good men. Our problem is sin, and the only solution for that is Jesus Christ. The rainbow was the seal of the covenant with Noah, but it points to a greater solution to our problem. As our rainbow is the seal of the covenant through Noah, it is our baptism for us who are Christians as a seal and confirmation that we are no longer bound by the sinful ways that we once walked in, but that we are bought and purchased by the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Noah was saved from calamity by the flood, by the ark, And we are saved by the calamity of sin, by the blood and body of Jesus Christ. The Apostle Peter says that himself in 1 Peter chapter 3. He says, because they formerly did not obey God, when God's patience waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely through the water, baptism, which corresponds to this, now saves you, not as a removal from dirt, but as an appeal to God for a good conscience through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Common grace is wonderful, but it only points to our need for salvation. My prayer this evening is that you understand that common grace is an amazing gift, but the new covenant that we have with Jesus Christ through the resurrection, represented in our seal of baptism, is the culmination of faith that Noah had. Saving grace is required for each of us. May we not take moments of recognition of the good gifts and promises that God has given us through common grace and just discredit it as, well, everybody gets it. But may we point to the greater work that God has done on the cross in Jesus Christ. My hope is that every time that we look for a rainbow in the sky, may it point to our baptismal waters and to that cross and the amazing work that Jesus was able to do for ourselves. That is truly the amazing grace that God has given us today. Amen? Let's pray.